It used to take one turn. That's the first thing I'm sure of. One smooth rotation of the key. One solid metallic click. Door unlocked. I've lived here 4 years. You don't think about how many times you unlock your own door, but your hands remember. Muscle memory is precise. One turn dot click dot push dot, it's single quotes s id. On Tuesday evening, I came home with groceries dot, it was raining lightly. I shook water off my jacket, inserted the key, and turned dot click dot and then dash resistance dot not lock dot. Just more space to turn. I rotated my wrists slightly farther. Second click. I stop dot. Stood there in the hallway dot listening dot doors. Don't add clicks dot locks. Don't grow extra mechanisms overnight. I tried it again. Dot turn dot click dot turn dot click dot two distinct points of resistance. Two deadbolt positions. The door opened normally. Nothing else seemed different. Inside looked the same. Dot no movement dot no disturbance. But I closed the door again and locked it from the inside. Dot one turn. Single click. That's normal. Dot the interior thumb turn still required one rotation, which means the extra engagement was happening only from the outside cylinder. That night, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I'd never paid attention. Maybe it had always been 2 turns and I just compressed it in memory. But muscle memory doesn't invent resistance. The next morning, I tested it slowly, inserted the key carefully, turned deliberately. Dot click dot pause dot then I pushed further. Dot second click. Not subtle. Not imagine. Dot distinct. Dot two locking points. I crouched to eye level with the lock. Dot it looked identical. Same brass finish. Dot same tiny scratch beneath the keyhole from when I dropped my keys last year. I ran my thumb over that scratch. Still there, but the metal around it looked slightly brighter. Dot polished. Dot clean. Dot locks accumulate grime over time. Dot this one felt recently handled. I unlocked it fully and removed the key. There were faint metallic shavings inside the keyhole. Dot very fine, like dust. I wiped the tip of the key against my sleeve. Dot tiny gray streak. Dot fresh. Dot which meant either the cylinder had been recently drilled or replaced. Dot or adjusted. I checked the strike plate inside the frame. Dot no visible changes. Dot no new screws. The deadbolt itself looked the same. Dot but when I locked it from outside, again, 2 turns, always 2. That afternoon, I pulled up an old video on my phone. 3 months ago, I had recorded a short clip of myself fumbling with groceries. The door unlock is in the frame. I slowed it down. Inserted key. Dot turn. Dot click. Dot door opens. Only one rotation. Dot no second engagement. That's when the unease shifted into something sharper. Because that means the change happened recently. Dot not gradually. Dot recently. Dot and I hadn't requested maintenance. I hadn't received notice. And the building requires written consent before lock replacement. I went downstairs casually. "Hey," I asked the front desk attendant, "did anyone replace cylinders recently?" He shook his head. "No lock work scheduled." "What about upgrades?" "Nope." I nodded. Dot went back upstairs. Dot closed the door. Locked it from inside. Dot one turn. Unlocked from inside. Dot one turn. But from outside 2, which means the modification is only in the exterior cylinder. Which means someone worked from the hallway side. Without entering, without asking. Dot without telling me. That night, I placed a tiny strip of tape across the seam, where the cylinder meets the metal plate. Dot barely visible. Just enough that if the cylinder were removed, the tape would tear. Then I went to bed. Dot at 2:37 am. I woke up. Dot not from noise, from certainty. You know that feeling when your brain tells you something changed? I got up slowly, walked to the door. The tape was intact. The cylinder hadn't been removed again, but I inserted the key. Turn. Dot click. Dot turn. Dot click. Dot the second click felt smoother. Dot less resistance than before, like it had been worn in. Dot adjusted. Dot calibrated. Dot and as I stood there holding the key, I realized something else. Dot If the lock now requires 2 turns to unlock from outside, then it also requires 2 turns to lock. Which means if someone has a key, they have 2 locking positions now, and I only use 1. The next morning, I decided to map it out if there were now 2 locking positions. I needed to understand them. I stepped outside into the hallway and closed the door gently. Inserted the key, turn, first click. I stopped there. Didn't push further. Tried the handle, it didn't open, So the first click was enough to engage the bolt, then I turned further, second click. Slightly deeper resistance. Tried the handle again. Still locked, which means both positions locked the door. But what was the difference? I unlocked fully and opened it. Then I looked closely at the deadbolt from inside while turning the key slowly from outside. First click. The bolt extended halfway. Not fully seated into the strike plate, second click, it pushed deeper. Fully seated, that meant the lock now had 2 depths of engagement. Aha, shallow lock, and a deep lock. I had never noticed that before, because it hadn't existed before. That afternoon, I tested something else. I locked it only to the first click, half depth, then I pulled the door slightly, there was a tiny bit of play. The door moved, maybe 1 millimeter, not enough to open, but enough to shift. Then I locked it to the second click, full depth. Pulled again. No movement at all, tighter, more secure. Which means the second turn isn't cosmetic, it reinforces the seal, strengthens the hold. Why would someone modify a single-cylinder deadbolt to have dual engagement? That's not standard residential hardware. That's controlled access. That night, before bed, I deliberately locked it only to the first click from inside. 1 turn of the thumb latch. Same as always. From inside, there's only 1 position, which means from inside, I can't engage the deeper lock. Only someone outside with a key can at 148 am I heard. It not loud, but unmistakable. Metal shifting inside metal. Rotation. Slow. Deliberate. Pause. Then second click. My chest tightened. I didn't move immediately. I listened. No footsteps in the hallway. No whisper of fabric. Just silence. I walked toward the door slowly. The deadbolt indicator on the inside was now rotated slightly farther than usual. I hadn't turned it twice. That means the exterior cylinder had been engaged, from outside with a key. Someone had turned my lock to the second position, fully seated, fully reinforced. While I was asleep, I didn't touch the handle, I didn't speak. I just stood there, listening for breathing, for shifting weight on the other side. Nothing. I pressed my ear against the door. Silence. I waited 5 full minutes. Still nothing. Finally, I unlocked it from inside. 1 turn. The bolt retracted, which means the interior mechanism disengages both positions with a single rotation. I opened the door quickly. The hallway was empty. Quiet. Carpet undisturbed. No movement near the stairs. But the air felt different. Colder. Not supernatural. Just recently disturbed. I stepped out and checked the cylinder. No tape damage. No visible tampering. But the keyhole had faint new polishing marks around it. Circular. Like a key had been inserted and rotated multiple times recently. The next morning, I reviewed the hallway schedule posted in the lobby. No maintenance. No inspection. No emergency access reported, which means whoever turned that key had access. And a reason to engage the deeper lock. The deeper lock isn't necessary for me. Vel lived here safely for 4 years with 1 click. But now, there's a second. Position. 1 that only functions from the outside. And someone used it while I was home. And the worst part, they didn't try to enter. They just made sure it was fully engaged. As if locking me in. After that night, I stopped locking it lightly. Every evening before bed. I turned the interior latch firmly, made sure it was fully engaged. even though from inside, there's still only one turn. There's no second position for me, only for someone outside. That detail stayed with me. Only for someone outside. 2 nights passed quietly. No sound. No movement. And then on Friday, something else happened. I came home later than usual, around 11:40 p.m. The hallway was empty. Inserted the key. Turn. Click. Turn. Click. Then dash resistance. Not a click. Not a full stop. Just resistance. As if something prevented the key from turning further. I pulled it out. Checked it under the hallway light. No. Oh, damage. Reincred. Turn. Click. Turn. Click. Then that same firm resistance. Like the cylinder didn't want to rotate fully into the second position. I tried to open the door at first position. It didn't move, which meant it was already fully locked from the inside. But I had left that morning. No. One was inside, which means someone had turned the interior mechanism, or there was another locking point. I stepped back, tried again. This time, I pushed harder past the resistance. There was a faint metallic scrape, then a third, softer click. Not as distinct as the first 2, but real. The door unlocked. I stood still. My heart beating harder now. 3 clicks. This lock was never a triple throw mechanism. Standard residential deadbolts don't have 3 stops. I opened the door slowly. Inside looked normal. Lights off. Nothing disturbed. But when I closed the door behind me and locked it from the inside, the thumb turn felt slightly tighter. Heavier. As if tension had been added. I crouched and examined the strike plate more closely. There were fresh indentations in the metal. 3 small compression marks, not 2, which means the bolt had been seating into 3 positions, and the door frame had been adjusted to allow that depth. I ran my finger along the edge of the door. The gap between the door and frame was smaller than before. Tighter seal, which means the frame had likely been modified to not replaced. Adjusted. Slightly shifted inward. You don't get deeper bolt engagement without realigning the strike plate. And realigning a strike plate requires loosening screws, moving hardware while the door is open. And I would have heard that, unless it was done when I wasn't home. But then, why didn't they notify me? That night, I decided to test something carefully. I locked the door to the single interior position. Then I stepped outside briefly to take out trash, closed it behind me, inserted the key. Turn. Click. The door unlocked. 1 turn was enough, which means from the outside, if the interior latch is set, the exterior key only needs 1 turn to disengage it. So what is the second click for? And what is the third? I locked it again from outside. Turn. Click. Turn. Click. Then I gently tried to push further. That third resistance was there again. I didn't force it this time. I just stopped. Went inside. Stood there thinking. The second click deepens the bolt. The third resistance seems to engage something else. Something not part of the original hardware. Something added. Because on Saturday morning, when I opened the door, there was a faint new scratch on the inner edge of the frame. Vertical. Thin. Like metal sliding against metal. Not at bolt height. Higher. Which means something else was moving inside the frame when the third position engaged. And then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The door no longer opened fully to 90 degrees. It stopped slightly earlier. As if the hinges had been adjusted to limit swing, which means someone had worked on both sides of the door. Cylinder. Strike plate. Hinges. All subtly recalibrated, without breaking in, without noise. Without consent. And now there are 3 points of engagement. But I only control 1. The second and third positions are accessible from outside. And last night, when I woke at 2:14 am, I didn't hear 2 clicks. I heard 3. Sunday morning. I tried to leave at 8:12 am. Coffee in hand. Keys ready. I unlocked the door from the inside. One turn. The bolt retracted. I pulled the handle. The door didn't move. Not stuck. Not jammed. Just held. Like something was still engaged. I turned the latch again. Nothing. The bolt was fully retracted. I crouched and checked it. Clear. But the door wouldn't open. Then I remembered the third resistance. I grabbed my keys and unlocked it from the outside. Instead, turn, click, turn, click, turn, soft resistance. I pushed slightly harder. Third, faint engagement. Then I reversed the motion. The key turned back. And suddenly, the door opened freely. Which means something in that third position was holding the door in place. Not a deadbolt. Something deeper in the frame. Something that only releases when the exterior cylinder cycles fully. From inside, I couldn't disengage it. I stepped into the hallway slowly, closed the door behind me, turned the key once to lock. Click. Then I tested the handle. It was locked. Then I tried turning further. Click. Second, depth. Then I pushed further. Resistance. I didn't engage the third. Instead, I unlocked and went back inside. This wasn't accidental. It wasn't wear and tear. This was staged reinforcement. I knelt and inspected the strike. Played again, removed one screw carefully. The plate shifted slightly. Behind it there was an additional metal cavity, not factory. Machined, inserted into the frame, a secondary channel above the main bolt. Hole. Narrow. Vertical. That single quotes S where the third engagement must be seating, not a second bolt. A shaantun. Locking bar. Slim. Hidden. Which means someone retrofitted my door frame. And you can't do that without removing the strike plate entirely. You can't carve deeper into the frame silently, not in an old building like this, unless it was done when I wasn't home. But I work from home, except 3 weeks ago, I spent 2 days at my sister's place, overnight. That's enough time. Enough time to modify hardware, replace cylinder, reinforce frame, add secondary retention. I went downstairs again, asked maintenance directly. Has my door ever been reinforced? He looked confused. No? Ever? No work orders on your unit. That answer felt rehearsed, or maybe I was just hearing it that way now. That night, I didn't lock it fully. I left it at the single interior turn. I wanted to see if someone would complete the cycle again. At 2:14 am in 3 clicks. Slow. Measured. 1. Pause. 2. Longer pause. 3. I didn't move immediately. I waited. There was no attempt to open. No handle pressure. No footsteps. Just the sound of full engagement, like someone ensuring the door was fully seated, fully secured. From the outside. The next morning, I tried to leave again without using the exterior key. Unlocked from inside. Door wouldn't open, which means the third mechanism had engaged overnight, and I cannot disengage it from inside. Only someone with the exterior key can. And when I examined the key under light, there was a faint new notch near the base. Micro dash cut. Barely visible. As if the key profile had been subtly altered. I compared it to the spare I keep in a drawer. The spare didn't have the notch, which means my primary key has been recut slightly. To accommodate the third engagement. Without me noticing, the spare no longer turns past the second click. Only my daily key does, which means someone had access to it, even briefly, enough to copy it. Modify it. Return it. And test it. And now there are 3 locking positions. 2 that secure the door. And 1 that secures me. From the outside. On Monday night, I didn't wait for 2:14. I locked it fully myself. From the outside. Turn. Click. Turn. Click. Pause. Then I pushed past the resistance. Third engagement. I listened to its seat inside the frame. A deeper metallic slide, different from the bolt. Something narrower. More vertical. Then I went inside and tried to open it. 1 interior turn. Bolt. Retracted. Door didn't move. As expected. This time, I didn't panic. I had planned for it. I had left the chain on loosely, not latched, just resting in place. I inserted the key from inside through the gap between door and frame as far as I could. It barely reached the cylinder. Not enough leverage. So I did the only thing that made sense. I waited. At 214 amer it was. A subtle metal contact. But this time, no clicks. No full cycle. Just pressure. Someone testing the cylinder. From the hallway. Testing whether the third engagement had already been set. They didn't need to lock it. I had done that for them. They were checking. Confirming. I stepped silently to the door and pressed my eye to the peephole. Empty hallway, but I heard the faintest shift of weight on carpet. Close. Very close. Not walking away. Just standing. Listening. Waiting. Then dashed the cylinder. Turned slightly. Counterclockwise. Just enough to test disengagement. They didn't unlock it fully. They just confirmed it could. And then they stopped. I stood there for a long time. Long enough that my legs started to ache. No further movement. No knock. No attempt to enter. Just verification. The next morning, I examined the cylinder under bright light. There was a fourth micro scratch near the edge. A faint crescent mark on the metal ring. A line slightly above the previous wear pattern. Not random. Layered. Incremental. 3 visible compression marks inside the strike plate. 4 micro wear arcs around the cylinder. Which means the mechanism isn't just triple engagement. There's a fourth tolerance, a micro position between second and third. A testing point. Not fully locked, not fully unlocked. Just calibrated. The spare key in my drawer no longer works past the first click. My primary key works through 3. And if I tilt it slightly, I can feel a fourth tension point. Barely there. Like the cylinder is waiting for a cut, deeper than mine. A key I don't have. That night, I did one final test. I removed the strike plate completely. Pulled the door closed gently, without locking it. Waited. 2:14 a.m. The cylinder. Turned. Click. Pause. Click. Pause. Then a hollow metallic slide. But this time, the mechanism didn't seat, because the strike plate wasn't there to receive it. There was a brief hesitation. A slight adjustment. Like confusion. Then silence. Which means the third and fourth engagements are not part of the original door. They rely on the modified frame, and someone expects them to be there. Every night. At the same time. Not to enter. Not to break in. But to secure. To confirm the door is fully engaged. Fully seated. Fully controlled. From the outside, I reinstalled the strike plate in the morning. But I didn't tighten the top screw fully. Just enough play that if the third mechanism engages, it will shift audibly. Tonight, when it turns, I'll hear more than clicks. I'll hear metal under stress. And I'll know exactly when they tested. Because now, I understand the system. There are 3 positions. I can feel. And one I can't. And that fourth position is for a key I don't own.